Guys, if you just joined us for Matthew Rosenberg's Coliseum Forum, that was super cool. I can't wait for that book, November 10th. But I'm here with one of my video game icons, a person you probably all know very well as Commander William Shepard. No, that's just in my version of Mass Effect. Commander Shepard, everybody, Mr. Mark Meer. How are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing well, Billy. Thanks for having me.
So I think the first thing we should talk about, which I'm really beyond excited about, is you're coming to Coliseum.
I am this weekend. I'll be in Tampa on the 1st, and then on the 2nd, I'll be at the Kissimmee store.
Wow. Have you, let me ask you this, have you been to Florida before? I mean, right?
Oh, yes. Many a time, both for MegaCon and before that several times for the Orlando Fringe, including, I think most recently I was there for the Fringe in 2018, and I did MegaCon that year. So, and also I met my wife in Orlando, as a matter of fact, at the Fringe Festival.
Is she a native Orlandian or?
No, she's British, actually. We were both there for a show at SAC Theatre. They have a big international theatre sports tournament during the Fringe, and that is where we first met.
So your wife is British, and you're, if I remember correctly, Canadian, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And you met in Orlando, Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Theater.
That's interesting.
Bringing people together, clearly.
Fair, absolutely. So, I introduced you. You're kind of one of the guests that don't really need a lot of introduction. But now I get to ask you all my super fun fanboy questions that
please, of course.
I wanted to ask you since I was 18 years old. So let's get this out of the way. The Citadel line, the infamous Citadel line from Mass Effect. Did you think that was going to be as meme worthy as it was when it was recorded?
I mean, I recorded it a lot. And again, a lot, in the same sense as I Should Go, BioWare could have paid Jennifer and I to say that once, but they very generously, considering we were on an hourly salary, recorded all those My Favorite Story on the Citadel separately. So I knew it had the flavor of an in-joke and that fans of the game would like it, but it really took off, let's face it. And I Should Go, which in no way was designed to be a catchphrase and yet became the de facto catchphrase. I really enjoyed that.
So, and you can correct me on any of these details if I'm wrong, but if I understand, like, you have your kind of roots in history, but besides, voice acting in like improv and comedy, is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that's pretty much how I got my start. And in fact, it's still a large part of my career.
So how do you go from that, which is, obviously, something a little bit different than saving the universe and defeating the Reapers and all that. How do you go from improv comedy to Commander Shepard?
Well, in a sense, it's because of improv comedy. The very first game I heard of BioWare putting out was MDK2. And some friends of mine who were in 2 comedy troupes, Three Dead Trolls and a Baggie and Atomic Improv, did all the voices for it. And I knew those guys, and they told me about this great gig that they'd just done. So I definitely kept my ear to the ground for any future news from BioWare. First of all, I was really surprised. There's a video game company in Edmonton. This was back in the 90s. So when they did do a big audition for Baldur's Gate 2, I believe it was, I was definitely made sure that I was in line. And it was a big old-fashioned cattle call audition with pretty much every actor in town showing up at a studio, going into the booth and recording some stuff. And I was one of the fortunate ones that got cast in Baldur's Gate 2 with one line. I had one line in the very final cutscene, and that final line led to future work with BioWare. Basically, pretty much every other game they'd put out since then.
Because you have, as Mark Meer, not Commander Shepard, popped up in Dragon Age and other games outside of as Mass Effect, obviously.
Yeah, Jade Empire. I did a lot of demo work on Knights of the Old Republic, the original one, and funnily enough, the person who I did several demo tracks for Knights of the Old Republic. So I was like a lot of Imperial officers, and I was Karth Onasi. And the person who actually ended up playing Karth in the finished version of the game is none other than Raphael Sabarge, who plays Caden in the Mass Effect series. So I joke with Raphael that's why I killed Caden on Vermeer.
Okay.
I joke. It is a joke. It is a joke. Raphael's a great guy.
Yeah, it's a joke.
Yeah, I did kill Caden on Vermeer, though. I'm sorry. That's
so.
A renegade was dating Ashley. What can I tell you?
No, listen. If they're going to give you the option, take care of it. Like, just move that opposition out of the way and move on with the game, right? So, for me at least, as a fan of gaming, and I don't know if it was the same for you as a voice talent. what, how did they pitch this game to you? They were like, hey, listen, so here's the idea. It's going to be super nonlinear. There's going to be like 4 million dialogue choices, and you're going to have to record all of them. And you could be a good guy or a bad guy, kind of like Knights of the Old Republic, but a lot different, a little bit more advanced. Like, how do you even start to wrap your head around the concept before the game is even, before you even step in?
Well, I mean, the concept is fairly easy to grasp. It was certainly an ambitious concept because, I'm a gamer myself. So I played the hell out of Knights of the Old Republic and, all those sorts of games. I tend to prefer RPGs, and especially RPGs with a morality system where you can decide and shape your character and how other people are going to respond to them. So the concept was an easy one to grasp. As I say, it was very ambitious because Commander Shepard is one of the first characters that was a voiced protagonist. Normally, up to this point, it would be blocks of text,
Right.
and you saw that like in the earlier Fallout games, for example. And those were the sort of games that I really enjoyed. So getting to be part of this bold experiment was something that was pretty gratifying.
So you already had the kind of prior relationship with him through like Baldur's Gates and things like that. How did they approach you about potentially coming on and doing Commander Shepard?
Well, when I started work on Mass Effect, it was in the concept art stage, and I was like brought in when they were building the universe, so I got to see it essentially, be from the foundations up. And I was brought in essentially to create a number of sound sets for how typical members of an alien race would sound. So this is what a typical Solarian sounds like. Here's what a typical Turian sounds like. Here's what a typical Krogan sounds like, and just sort of find different alien character voices that would be like, this is what a baseline version of this species is. So I basically did a presentation for the devs, and they didn't necessarily take all of my advice. Like, for example, one thing they didn't use was what I'd suggested for the Turians, like looking at their mouth structure. I thought it might be interesting if they had sort of like a little click sound, at the end of sentences or something like that. This was, of course, before Garrus was actually in the game as like a main NPC, like companion character. And I was later told it's like, yeah, we kind of threw that out because Garrus has a lot of dialogue, and like a clicking sound would have gotten very repetitive and probably irritating. So, but some of the stuff is very obvious, like, the Volus, they make a wheezing sound when they talk because they have their gas mask apparatus.
Right.
And I do take credit for why, I'm the reason that Solarians kind of all sound like Steve Buscemi, because that was the sort of cadence that I was using for the typical Solarian. It also helped that the typical Solarian I was laying down was like a bartender character. So like, no, just Steve Buscemi as this green bald alien appealed to me. And while I was working on this stuff, they asked me to, I was laying down like some demo dialogue as I had in other games. And they asked me to audition for Commander Shepard. And I really didn't place any chances, any wager on the chance of me winning, because I was like, this will obviously go to someone from the States, and I'll get to do a bunch of aliens and monsters. And so subsequently, even when callbacks were coming in, it was just like, oh, okay, another callback. Sure, I'll do it while I'm doing my other work. That's fine. By the time I was told it was down to me and 2 other guys from LA, I was like, well, clearly one of them will do it, and I'll do the aliens. I'll do a bunch of aliens. But as I was told that, no, it's you. You're going to be Commander Shepard and a bunch of aliens.
So at this point, like during the development, you're like, yeah, I'm going to end up being this Solarian guy. I'll do this Krogan. And then they're like, no, you're the guy. Like, you're Commander Shepard.
Yeah, no, and it was certainly a thrill, especially when I found out that Jennifer Hale was playing the female version of Commander Shepard, because I have been a fan of Jennifer's for a long time. She, of course, is a very prolific voice actor. Her and Steve Bloom, I think, both have the Guinness Book of World Record for the most roles, I think, across all media in voice acting. And I was a big fan of hers from her animation work on Justice League and of course, subsequently, like Earth's Mightiest Heroes and things like that. A big superhero and comic book fan. So I think Jennifer, as I recall, was like the go-to voice for Zatanna, even like back in the Batman the Animated Series days. So I was really thrilled to be told that I'm essentially playing the same character as one of the best in the industry. So yeah, that was extremely exciting. I'd played up to this point like mostly monsters and antagonists and the random NPCs and that sort of thing. So to get to be the main character in a video game was, yeah, that was something else.
Absolutely. Okay, so I don't want to spring this on you, but we're going to do something a little bit different with Coliseum Forum. We have a couple of super fans that work for us here at Coliseum Comics. Now, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I got to do my fanboy stuff before we went live. I'm so excited to be talking with you. But we have employees that would literally climb over my dead body to ask you some questions. And so
of course,
I got with those super fans at Coliseum, talked to them a little bit, and they sent me some questions. So I'm actually going to ask, instead of me doing my interview like I usually would, I'm actually going to do their interview and ask their questions for you because they are gigantic, ridiculous fans of yours. Actually, I don't want to embarrass them too much, but a few of them actually work at Kissimmee when you're there, so be careful.
Perfect. All right. Very well. Very well.
All right. So standard questions. What got you into voice acting?
As I mentioned, that audition, basically, that was the very first voice work I ever did for video games. I'd done some things before. When one is an actor, you go to a lot of different auditions. You might go to something, voiceover for a commercial. You might be doing a play. So I would do lots of different auditions for lots of different projects. And that audition was my very first, video game voice acting role.
Right. So, we talked about this a little bit in the beginning, improv comedy. What initially drew you to improv and comedy?
I mean, I didn't do improv in high school like a lot of people. In fact, I credit Dungeons and Dragons as being some of the first improv I ever did, especially because I was a dungeon master. Also, some of the first character voices that I ever did was playing Dungeons and Dragons. So when I was introduced to improv, it was because I was doing a sketch comedy show. And unlike a lot of people in it, I didn't have any improv experience. And, the directors of the show talked about how improv is a great tool for generating material for sketch. So I was introduced to that with a group called Rapid Fire Theater up here in Canada. And once I tried it, I very much enjoyed it. I'd been a big fan of sketch comedy, Monty Python, SCTV, Kids in the Hall. And sort of finding out the connection between improv and sketch comedy, which I hadn't been aware of up to that point, was revelatory. So I really dove in with both feet, one might say.
So this is something, and I learned this. Like I said, I was like, okay, guys, I'll ask your questions of Mr. Meer, get them together for me, but make sure they're good questions because I'm the one that has to ask them. And this is actually a pretty good one.
Okay.
And I'm going to read it verbatim. So I was like, wow, they really did some research on this one. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of it's a question and then it's a little bit of exhibition, but it says, how did you get into how did you get into Dungeons and Dragons? And then in parentheses, it says he has played since 1981 and collects every book that releases aside from 4th edition, but who can blame him? Is that true?
Okay, so yes, I have been playing since 1981, and I actually started playing with a group of slightly older kids, like kids that are like 2 or 3 years older than me, who needed another person for their party, and they were the ones that introduced me to D&D. So I didn't start with the red and blue books or the boxes, basic and expert sets. I actually started playing AD&D. And subsequently, my parents got me, the red and blue boxes. But I always felt like, this feels like going back to training wheels. I want to play AD&D. So because I wanted more detail and whatnot. So I basically just started playing with a group of friends, and then subsequently, as they got older and some of them moved away, I had to be the permanent dungeon master at that point. If I wanted to play, I had to teach people how to play and then always be the dungeon master. Yes, I did. I did not actually get any 4th edition books. I did, I looked at some of them. I quite like the art in some, but my main jam up to 5th, before 5th edition released, was all the 3rd edition and 3.5 Ravenloft stuff. That was what I was really a serious collector of. And I think I got pretty much everything that was published under that banner. So I was really pleased when they brought out Van Richten's Guide to, Curse of Strahd, obviously, first, and then Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft more recently, especially because it meant I got to do a show with some friends of mine on the official Dungeons & Dragons Twitch and YouTube channels. That's every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. It's called the Black Dice Society, and it is set in Ravenloft. And our DM is B. Dave Walters, who is very well known in the gaming circles and an excellent dungeon master. It's really one of my favorite campaigns to play, and I get to play it on the D&D channel, so that's great.
You actually kind of flowed right into what I want to talk about next. I mean, we're the Black Dice Society, but you kind of mentioned you were, for a time, the forever DM. What's it like to be kind of back into the player seat versus, you know, creating these adventures for people?
It's a lot less responsibility, and just being able to show up and play, I must say, is great. But I do still DM. And as a matter of fact, I'm one of the DMs for D&D in a castle, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's you're going over to the UK and playing Dungeons and Dragons in a castle for a whole weekend. And these castles are also 5-star hotels, so it's pretty nice. It's quite good and very immersive, obviously. So I do that. I also coming up next year for the first time, I'm going to be doing something called D3 at Sea, which is a Dungeons and Dragons cruise. That's I'll definitely have to come up with something nautical for that. I've got a couple of things in mind, but I haven't quite finished my campaigns.
Do you find yourself particularly drawn to a certain class or race, or?
I'm almost always spellcasters of one type or another. More recently, funnily enough, I told you about how I started playing with those older kids, and back in the day, it always seemed to be the case that they always needed a cleric, like you were, because nobody wanted to play the cleric. Right. So that was one of my first characters, was a cleric. But more recently on Black Dice Society, I play a cleric in D4, which is another show some friends of mine do out of Atlanta. I guest on that regularly as a dragonborn cleric of Bahamut, and they've both been very fun to play. Both Kaiser Vex, my dragonborn, and Brother Uriah, who is my character on the Black Dice Society, and they're both lawful good clerics, but they're very different. They're very different individuals.
So, and this goes for, and you just mentioned those two characters are very different, and I kind of want to tie this to a D&D and Mass Effect question here. Playing your characters, do you find yourself leaning more towards like a Paragon sort of character or a Renegade sort of character?
I mean, both of those would be paragons because they are lawful good and they're very selfless, upstanding folks. But some of my favorite characters are, like, for example, Baloth, who is a character that I started playing in the Baldur's Gate Enhanced editions. He was created by Beamdog. He's an insane drow sorcerer, and if you've played the Baldur's Gate Enhanced editions, he's the main boss villain of the Black Pits, which is the sort of mini adventure where your party gets kidnapped and forced to fight in the Underdark in this weird gladiatorial combat arena. And he is the master of the Black Pits. And he was a great maniacal villain to play. And I've subsequently got to play him in actual Dungeons and Dragons games. So both at D&D Live a few years ago and more recently on Idle Champions Presents, which is a show that Codename Entertainment puts out. They're the guys that do Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, right. And they've got a bunch of us who have characters that are embodied in the game to get together and actually play D&D as those characters. So you've got, my character Baloth, who is, as I mentioned, a maniacal drow. He is chaotic evil, so he's the opposite of those characters. I like to play the full spectrum. Really enjoyed playing a chaotic neutral goblin bard recently named Milbog. Got to play him also at D&D in a castle in the DM's game that we did for all the players. And I've been playing him in a campaign during the pandemic as well, because I have, I played D&D before, but the sheer amount of online D&D I've played in the last 18 months is, it's fulfilled my wildest dreams, really.
Well, and that was kind of where I was leading to my next question. If you had to, playing D&D as like a hobby versus playing D&D as kind of like a career or job, right? Like, what is that like to kind of turn your hobby into like a thing that you can do for a living?
Well, I mean, it's great. It's if one can figure out a way to do that, that is always good. And I don't know, for me, it was a bit of a seamless transition because I've been doing a show called Improvised Dungeons and Dragons since 2009, 2010. And that was in large measure me reacting to the fact that it was really hard to get a D&D game among adults together. It was very hard to schedule it. It's much easier these days because of Zoom and whatnot, and everyone suddenly, about a year ago, having a lot of free time. But before that, I basically, at my improv company, I was like, I want to do a D&D show, and we'll basically just play it as if it was a D&D campaign. So we'll have the same characters going through. The players are all in full costume with their weapons and their equipment and everything. And there's several formats. I know of quite a few improv companies that have some sort of improvised Dungeons and Dragons show. But in my format, I essentially am the dungeon master, so I do everything a dungeon master would do,
right,
which is play all the monsters, but also all the townspeople and their mentors, and the guy that gives them their mission. And that is a really fun show to do. And I've got to do that down in Atlanta with some of my friends from Dad's Garage Theater. I've done it in London, England, at the Improvathon there. And so for a while I'd been doing Dungeons and Dragons as like a show. So now with all these streaming shows that I'm doing, whether guesting on or as a regular, it feels like it's just moving into, it feels like much the same thing. And I should mention, like, especially during the pandemic, in addition to all these streaming shows I've been doing, I've been playing very regular weekly campaigns with folks in the UK and New Zealand and friends of mine in LA. So yeah, it's just been one big festival of RPGing and nerding out here at my house.
Obviously, I work in a comic book shop. We I don't know if I've ever met anybody that works in a comic book shop that doesn't play pen and paper, or Dungeons and Dragons, or some form of role playing, right? Mm-hmm. But it's always been kind of like very like specific to like, oh yeah, the nerds play D&D, right? Of which I like to consider myself a nerd, obviously.
Right here.
See, we're in good company, right? But what do you think of like the recent, probably in the last 5 or so years, this kind of like surgence of Dungeons and Dragons, where it's in like the popular zeitgeist, like a person's never heard of a dragon or a dungeon, now all of a sudden that they have a party with their office coworkers, right?
I think that's fantastic. I really like the fact that all the weird nerdy niche things that I liked when I was younger are now very much mainstream. Like not only Dungeons and Dragons, but also superheroes, because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe largely. Because things like fantasy is just big because of Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, and that those were things that a large segment of the population watched and enjoyed, not just a select few. So I quite like the fact that a lot of the things that I liked are a little more mainstream these days. And as I say, when you've got like such a large pool of people playing Dungeons and Dragons, it becomes a lot easier to find games and find people to play with. Yeah.
So actually, I think that's a really good question. If I was somebody that was interested in potentially getting into Dungeons and Dragons, and obviously you've played in a lot of games, especially very recently, what would be your recommendation to somebody that was like, hey, I want to dip my toes into this. Where could I find a game? How would you go about finding a game if you weren't Mark Meer?
Well, I have the advantage of people just inviting me to games. Right. So once they find out that I'm a player. So, there are lots of online resources. There's places like Sword and Scroll, which is sort of the online equivalent of the folks who do D&D in a castle. And I've DM'd some games from them and been NPCs in other games, and that they've always been great. I think ultimately Discord is probably the best place to find games and things like that these days. And there's lots of like sort of online clearinghouses where it's just like, hey, we're just looking for some folks to set up a game. And because everyone has Zoom now, like 18 months ago, right, not everyone had Zoom. Not everyone had all this conferencing software.
Sure, absolutely.
But now everyone does. So it makes it a lot easier. And as far as, I know that in most areas, in-person gaming is not necessarily going to be on the table, as we say. But once things are a little bit more under control, your local comic shop or your local gaming store is usually the best place to find a game. There's going to be a place to sign up. There's probably regular games that are run there on a weekly basis. So absolutely. Yeah, that's the best place to check out.
So besides improv, besides voice acting one of the most legendary video games characters of all time, and being a D&D player like the rest of us. You're also a cosplayer. Is that true?
That is true. I enjoy wearing the costumes. I should mention I'm not one of those cosplayers who's very talented with needle and thread and whatnot and 3D printing. I'm the sort of person who knows talented people, and I get these talented people to make awesome costumes for me, and then I wear those awesome costumes.
So obviously you did your promo video for us. You're going to come see us, and you were Loki, obviously.
Yes, I was a TVA variant of Loki, and I also, in that particular promo, I had a couple of friends with me who were also like my friend Honor was dressed as a TVA librarian, and her husband Roman, who's also my friend, had an immaculate classic Loki costume, like real leather and the whole bit. So I drafted them into my little promo that I shot for you guys at Dragon Con. If I'd done it a little later, I could have had like a dozen variants of Loki in there. But it might have been. I think wrangling all of them might have been quite a challenge. So
wrangling Lokis is probably like herding cats, I would imagine.
I would think so. Yeah, there were a lot of Lokis at Dragon Con this year. I'll tell you that.
I believe it. I mean, first of all, he's a really cool character, and
every second person was Loki or a variant of Loki.
So, and honestly, if you guys want to see some more of Mark's cosplay, you can check out his social media. He has some really, really cool costume pictures. But personally, what are some of your favorite cosplays that you've done over the years?
Well, I do tend to favor super villains as opposed to heroes, and I do like the obscure ones. So I think in terms of both of those categories, my pinnacle would probably be the Super Adaptoid. I did a Super Adaptoid costume about 10 years ago now at Dragon Con. And that one was a lot of fun. And again, like I say, I know talented people. And so among the people I know, I would sort of go to each one and say, you do an excellent scale mail Captain America shirt. I saw that you made one. That'd be great. Could you make one for me in green? And same thing. It's like, I saw you did a really good Hawkeye cowl. Could you make one for me in green? And because that's what Super Adaptoid looks like. He's a weird sort of patchwork amalgamation of all the Avengers, but all in different shades of green. So that is the costume that I put together. I'll probably bring him back to Dragon Con at some point. Let's see. Most recently, I did a little mashup costume that was inspired by what I got for Christmas this year. I got a Mandalorian action figure, and as I was putting him on the shelf, I noticed like, hey, I bet I could take the helmet off, and yep, it fits on my Commander Shepard action figure. So I did Commandalorian Shepard, which was a mashup of Commander Shepard and the Mandalorian. I even had like a little Asari baby Liara, I guess, not baby Yoda. And so the fellow David Carpenter, who actually built my original Commander Shepard armor, again about 10 years ago, he very kindly also built me some new Mandalorian bits but from the same material, so it all looked like the same suit. And my friend Dustin Fletcher from Atlanta made this beautiful weathered leather cloak, and that costume came together very well.
So I don't know if my dear employees are setting me up on this next question, and if this is a true question, because it doesn't feel very real, because I feel like I would have known this one. And if it's upon penalty of death kind of question, like obviously we move on very quickly, but there was a teaser trailer for a new Mass Effect game where Liara finds Commander Shepard's armor in the snow. Which ending do you think BioWare may be moving forward with?
Well, I'm not sure if I'd be free to speculate, even if I knew.
See, I think that's what they were looking for there.
Right.
And then every time the cast does events for the game, you guys all seem to genuinely enjoy being around each other. Is there a singular event or a series of events that led you guys becoming friends?
I'd say that series of events, because from my perspective, at least, I didn't meet most of the cast until after the fact. Until I started doing conventions, and then we met at conventions, because I did all my recording in Canada, or the bulk of it. I did a little bit in London and a little bit in LA, just because I happened to be in those cities when they needed me. But for the most part, I did it at BioWare, or one of the studios that they use here in Edmonton. And so it was at conventions that I slowly met the rest of the cast. Some people I got to meet during the process. Martin Sheen, for example, when he was recording his final scenes as the Elusive Man, my director, Caroline Livingstone, very nicely called both Jennifer and I, because I happened to be in LA at the time and she lives there, and said, "Do you want to come in and meet Martin Sheen when he does his last session?" I was like, "Yeah, we'd like that. Yeah, we would very much like that." So that was fantastic. So most of our, the camaraderie that I think is genuine that you see when we all get together is for the result of us hanging out at conventions together and socializing there.
Okay. Next question, and I think this one's kind of more of like one of those fanboy questions, but who would have won that rifle contest? Was it you or Garrus?
Well, you have the option to let Garrus win. But yeah, I mean, I think you'll never be better than Commander Shepard, but there is no Shepard without Vicarian. So what are you going to do?
So I cannot believe that I get to talk to you about Dungeons and Dragons with the Black Dice Society and Mass Effect Legendary Edition out right now. I don't know why. Why are you watching this? I mean, this is kind of cool, but you could be playing and listening to Commander Shepard in the game. And
this is true.
The fact that you're going to be here October 1st and 2nd at Coliseum Comics Kissimmee and Coliseum Comics New Tampa. We actually hear this a lot. If you live in Tampa, if you live in Kissimmee, they don't like driving back and forth. So the fact that they can go to their local Coliseum and meet you, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of excited people. I don't want to take up any more of your time because this is way too cool. I can't wait to meet you in person. But Mr. Meer, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh,
thank you
thanks
so
for
much
having me. And I'm actually quite looking forward to my visit because I understand you guys have some giant and excellent statues of various comic book characters that I want to check out.
So you've heard about us.
In fact, one of my friends, Spider, actually did modifications on one of your statues for you.
Hey, yes, he has.
He made,
do you want to?
I was going to say he made your Gladiator Hulk. Is that correct?
He did. He's done quite a bit of work for us in terms of the Hulk. So to kind of give you a spoiler for when you visit the stores,
I've seen pictures.
Okay, yeah. So he did our Gladiator Hulk. He did the conversion for Red Hulk, and then in New Tampa we have another Hulk. And he did the actual jeans that Hulk is wearing. Like he actually has real denim jeans, and that was Spider's work as well.
Nice. Yeah. He does good work. He's made many a prop for me. I mentioned I had talented friends that make me things.
You did mention talented friends. I didn't realize
he's one of them.
Friends. That's awesome. All right, well, Mr. Rick, thank you so much for stopping by. I can't wait to meet you this weekend. I'm sure there are tons of Coliseum faithful that are super excited to meet you. Please get here safe so that we can high five and talk some more in person. But again, thank you so much, sir.
Cool, my friend. We will see you later, Billy. Oh, and before we go, I would just like to thank Mr. Moshi John for the invite.
Oh, good shout out.
Yes, my old friend from the Dragon Con days, and I'll look very forward to seeing him as well.
If you're a Coliseum faithful, you probably met Moshi before. Moshi is our events and marketing coordinator here at Coliseum.
Okay. Are we still live? Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks very much. And yeah, sorry for the technical. I hope Billy's all right. I did. Okay, wait, he typed something in chat. Arg. Uh-oh, I think something got him. Yeah. Still alive, man.